So, welcome, Dr. BJ Fogg and Stephanie, to the Child Psych podcast. We're so glad you could join us today.
Thank you for inviting us. And I'm so glad my colleague Stephanie Weldy can be here. She works really closely with me and she is an expert on habits and kids.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Delighted to be here.
Yeah. And I mean, I got 3 kids at home, and especially the ones that are starting, like my 15-year-old starting to launch. And then I've got a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old. And this is the time, even as a parent, I'm thinking about habits and like how we cultivate them. And I think every parent alive and anyone who works with kids is like, how do we change behavior? Like that is just such a huge focus in psychology, right? Really the roots of how psychology came to be. And I guess I want to start first of all, BJ, to talk a little bit about your work, like how this came to be and like how you became an expert in habits, because that's a really neat specialty. I've been watching your TED Talks. I encourage people to watch him.
Well, I'll be brief. So I was trained at Stanford in basically experimental psychology. So run true experiments and to understand things through the scientific method that hasn't been understood before. Fast forward in about 2000, so I did that for about 10 years, looking at technology and how technology can benefit our lives and also cause problems. And in about 2008 and 9, my research lab at Stanford shifted away from technology to look at human behavior and specifically habits. And at that time, this model had already landed for me. Like I had this insight around how behavior works for all people, all cultures, all ages. And I call it the behavior model. And I think we'll talk about that in a little bit. Mm-hmm. And that behavior model then became the springboard to have understanding around many behavior types and how to create them, including habits. So a habit is a type of behavior. It's a subset of behaviors. And then at some point outside of Stanford, I felt I needed to upgrade my life and my habits. I started goofing around with habits, looking at my own behavior model for guidance. And over the course of the year, developed a method that was really easy to create habits and even kind of fun. And I called it Tiny Habits. And then in 2011, I started teaching Tiny Habits to people all over the world. And eventually hundreds of people signed up every week. I would do evaluation on the weekend, revise the 5-day program. And I did that for many years. After 10,000 people, coaching 10,000 people personally, I made a presentation at an academic and professional conference about here's how habits really work in people's lives and here's how to create them. And then time to time I would count, because week after week after week, I was coaching hundreds of people personally through email. And then I stopped counting at 40,000. And then people really wanted a book. And so I wrote the book, Tiny Habits, to bring together this simple but powerful method, and not just abstract, my hands-on practice in coaching tens of thousands of people. And that's what's in the book, Tiny Habits. And that's what we're talking about today, probably.
Yeah, that's really important because it's not only for, we have a lot of professionals who listen too. And this isn't just about kids. This isn't just about teens. We all have nasty habits we want to break and healthier habits we want to adopt, whether that's eating better or getting more exercise or cleaning our house or any of these things that are probably going to make our lives a little bit better. But changing behavior is not easy unless you have a model to enact it. I think often like we take on these huge things like I'm going to lose 100 pounds or I am going to go to the gym 5 days a week. And very quickly we realize that falls apart, like very quickly, and we get defeated. And then we're back on the couch eating potato chips. Like unravels very quickly.
And let me go to that directly. So on a podcast like this audio, you can't see the 2-dimensional behavior model, but there's a graphic that is pretty important. If you go to behaviormodel.org, you'll find it, but I'll talk about it without needing that. So behavior model goes like this. A behavior happens, and that includes a habit, happens when 3 things come together at the same time. There's motivation to do that behavior or the habit. There's the ability to do it, and there's a prompt. And it's those 3 factors, and it's only those 3 factors. And if you're missing any one of those, like missing motivation or missing ability or missing the prompt, the behavior won't happen. Now, there's a relationship, and you can see this on the two-dimensional version of the model between motivation and ability. And what that shows is if a behavior is hard to do, so you pick a habit that's hard to do, like run for an hour every day, you need lots of motivation to do that. So something that's difficult requires lots of motivation. And when your motivation drops, you won't do that behavior. Whereas if something's really easy to do, like 3 calming breaths as soon as you sit in your car coming home from work, then you don't need tons of motivation to do it. So there is this relationship between motivation and ability. And what often happens historically in the old ways of changing behavior is you pick something really hard and you say, oh, I'm going to be motivated this time and I'm really going to do it. But our motivation naturally varies. I call it the motivation wave. It goes up and down. And that's not a fault. It's just how we are. And so what people don't account for is my motivation is going to drop for this huge workout or this radical way of changing how I eat and so on. And that means I won't be consistent with the habit. And so tiny habits goes to the other side. And this was what I did in 2010, goofing around with my own habits, is like, wow, let's make it so easy. Let's set the bar so low that I need almost no motivation to do the habit. And if I want to do more, I can, but I set the bar low so I can be very consistent and so I can be successful. And that's in some ways the breakthrough of the tiny habits method. It's setting the bar really low and not relying on high levels of motivation. In some ways, I want to say it's not fooling ourselves that we will be able to continue to motivate ourselves at a high level. It's just being realistic about how we're wired. That motivation will go up and down. And so design so the habit is really easy. You set the bar really low.
Perfect. I'm thinking about it in terms of like a parent, and a really benign like example would be when I can't, the motivation, maybe Stephanie's a mom, so maybe she can like help me with this. When I was teaching my kids, and they all have chores, right? Like that's something that I worked on, and I can probably speak to like some other child psychology principles with this. But the biggest thing for me was at first is scaffolding it. So the ability was like doing it with my kids or having your older sibling do it with them. So it wasn't like, here, you're 5, you have to do the dishwasher by yourself. Like my 5-year-old is going to break things. They're going to get frustrated. So there was that. There was ability. And then a prompt. It happened at the same time every day. It's when they got up, they had to check the dishwasher before they had breakfast. It can't be at different times of the day. Like for my kids, it's got to be either before dinner or when they get up in the morning. And if I try to do it at any other time, it's lost. It's gone. Like they will not consistently do it. But Stephanie, what do you think that when we are introducing as a parent a chore or eating our vegetables or I don't know, like cleaning the basement, motivation, where does that come in when you've got littles? Like, what do you think? Like,
Yeah. Well, I'm working on this problem every day. I have a 2 and 4-year-old about to turn 3 and 5, but so for context, that's where I am in my personal parenting journey. But I think what you're doing when you're helping your child learn the skill of unloading the dishwasher, that you're teaching them, hey, this is part of our family's routine. This is where it fits into your daily routine. This is the prompt. In the tiny habits method, we would call it like an anchor moment. Like after you walk into the kitchen the first time in the morning, you go to the dishwasher. And maybe to make it super tiny, it's just you open the dishwasher. Woohoo, good job. And if my 4-year-old did that reliably as a parent, I would be delighted, right? Like that would be the best starter step to the full behavior, which is unloading the dishwasher. Now, tapping into their motivation, the first maxim in behavior design, we call it Fogg maxim number 1, is help people do what they already want to do. Let me reframe it for parents. Help your children do what they already want to do. So what I'm thinking as a parent, if I have a chore I need my kid to do before school or first thing in the morning or right after school, is I'm thinking, how do I help my sons do what they already want to do? Well, they definitely, before school, they come to the kitchen. What are they thinking? Breakfast, right? So it's like, hey, let's call him Robert, because that's his real name, not as the name he goes by. But it's like, hey, Robert, come to the dishwasher with me. If you open it and then your breakfast plate is on the other side of the island. Good job. You helped me open the dishwasher. Thank you so much. And this is real in my life. It's like, help me unload just the silverware. Because my 4-year-old can reach the drawer and he's like super organized. He's one of those firstborn. So he likes to put the knives with the knives, the big spoons with the big spoons, and so on. And you can grow that habit over time. But it's the feeling of success that helps Robert or your kid wire in the new behavior in their routine. In this case, you want it to be a habit. So that's kind of a lot wrapped into the example, but notice how practical it is for households everywhere. There's things your kid wants to do, there's things you want your kid to do, and how do we find the middle ground to help them feel successful as they try those new behaviors and hopefully succeed in the way you both care about.
Yeah. And one of the things I was watching, BJ, your TED Talks, the one from 10 years ago was one I was kind of sifting through it for our podcast. And you really talk about this idea of celebration, which I really appreciate, that like when we can commend ourselves for just small shifts, and kids so badly want to be seen by their parents. Like we all want to be seen, but kids have this biological evolutionary drive for acceptance, particularly from their parents. So that's a huge place. Can you speak to that a little bit about like celebration and how you...
Yes, this is so important. And Stephanie touched on this. I mean, the second maxim, and she said this, but didn't call it as the second maxim, is help people feel successful. It's that feeling of success that does lots of things, including causing a behavior to become automated, causing a behavior to become a habit. That's what a habit is. It's an automated behavior. It's that type of behavior. And the key to habit formation is not repetition. Don't believe the old stuff people say. It is the feeling of success. And that the stronger the feeling is that's associated with opening the dishwasher or, putting your shoes back in the cubby, the faster that will become a habit. And so the project to help ourselves or other people to create habits is to help them feel successful at the right moment. Okay. Now, in our own lives, if we want to create the habit of flossing, there's probably not somebody there cheering for us, like, you flossed your tooth, way to go. So we have to do it to ourselves. We cause ourselves to feel successful. And in the tiny habits method, that technique we call celebration. So you find something you can do in that moment while you're flossing or as soon as you're done, say, good for me, or you smile in the mirror, you go, woohoo, or if you can go there, you do this happy dance. What you want to do is cause a genuine positive emotion inside yourself, a feeling of success. And that's what accelerates the formation of the habit. And you can look at this in your own life, everybody listening. If there's a product that you use every day, all the time, you love it. If you rewind and think, when was the first time I used this type of pen and what was my emotional reaction? If you think carefully, I guarantee almost always the first time you use that pen or that app or that water bottle, there was this feeling of success. It was like, oh my gosh, it helped you feel more successful in an area you cared about. In some ways, it helped you feel like you had a superpower. So that happens naturally with products and services. It also happens naturally with certain behaviors. But in the tiny habits method, we don't just leave it to chance. You celebrate, you self-reinforce. I should have said that word earlier. You're self-reinforcing. Now let's flip back to what Stephanie was talking about. It could be with kids or spouses or students. If you can help them feel successful at the right moment, not 30 minutes after they open the dishwasher, but immediately after they open it, help them feel successful. That's where you're leveraging the brain chemistry and you're helping that become a habit. Now, there's a lot of other benefits to helping people feel successful. This is such an important concept. But I'll stop there. Hopefully it's clear how important that emotion is. And we call that emotion shine. So within tiny habits, we call that feeling of success, we call it shine. And so I hope it's clear how important shine, that feeling of success, is for creating habits in ourselves and helping other people create habits.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that motivation is so important. And then bringing in like the celebration to kind of seal the deal, so to speak. And one of the things is we want, I think, for our kids is they're not with us forever. We sometimes I'm happy to think that, and other times it makes me want to like weep and myself to sleep at night. But I want my kids to be intrinsically motivated. I don't want, I can't be there for every second cheering them on with this. So what I'm hearing is we have to find ways to teach kids how to celebrate their own successes too, but that might start, and Stephanie, you could probably speak to this, it starts with how we are kind of reinforcing those small successes and the kind of language we use. I don't know if you've done a lot of work around that, but instead of saying like, good job, then it becomes about you making me happy. It's less about that child feeling,
Yeah.
why are they proud? I don't know if you guys have done a little bit of work on that you could speak to that, because I think that's important part of, we're trying to create kids who are self-motivated. We can't be there forever. So when we're thinking about bridging your from kids to your adult model for the tiny habits methods, like is there anything around language you guys could speak to when we were working with motivation with kids?
BJ, I'll let you speak to the intrinsic, extrinsic motivation distinction, but let me give a couple examples of the way I do this with my kids, like every day.
Yeah.
So I have a 2-year-old who's potty training, and when I put him, after I put him on the potty, he was the kid that was like very resistant to using the potty. Maybe a lot of kids are, but like my son was like, I don't have to go. Like he got real like nasty real fast. And I learned that I didn't need to be like, good job, like because that didn't feel genuine with him. Instead, I said, let's just relax and take a deep breath. Mommy's going to take a deep breath. And I just I kind of like hunkered down with him. And then as he would naturally use the bathroom, I would say, how do you feel? And I would kind of like smile and say it in an intriguing way, because using the toilet has a sense of relief. And so I'm not trying to get him to be falsely like motivated. I'm trying to help him observe or experience the relief and the positive success he's having potty training. Now, other times I'll have his big brother come in and say, go Edie, go Edie. We make it like a fun thing, but that's one example. Another example, this is totally different. My older son is quite introverted, quite shy. He doesn't get that from me. And when he goes to school, his idea of connection is connection with the teachers, connection with the activities. It's really hard for him to connect with the friends. That just is not inherent for him yet. So instead of saying, Robert, you got to talk to new kids today. We want to hear who you talk to at the end of the day. We just said, hey, did you know how to spell Jonah's name? Jonah is Jonah. Or we just talked to him at large about maybe it's connect with one friend, or who are you going to sit with at lunch today? Or, just try and help him see that even one connection, sharing a toy or doing an activity with one other kid is a success. And like, you should be so proud that you talked to Jonah at school, or that you did this thing that's a singular moment. Now, let me go to BJ for more to the motivation, but I'm just giving examples of tiny in the life of a parent trying to help their kid tap into what they might be naturally motivated towards.
I want to shine a spotlight on what Stephanie said about just helping her child notice the positive feeling. And so, in other words,
I loved that.
Yeah, give time to recognize success, recognize positivity. I think that's super powerful. I want to talk about motivation in a way that may not be typical, but I think it is actually more important than the intrinsic extrinsic distinction, which actually falls apart when you look at it very carefully. That's on the surface works, but when you get deeper into it, it doesn't work. What I want to talk about is motivators and demotivators. So for any given behavior, and I'll make up one. So let's say you want your daughter to be more of a leader, and it's like, why don't you run for class secretary? And she's like, yeah, so part of her might be motivated to run for class secretary, but part of her is demotivated that. Okay, so if you could understand what's motivating her, oh, she wants to please you as a parent. Well, oh, she also knows that it would be good for her. And, oh, she would love to have status with her friends. Those are all motivators pushing her up. And if we're looking at the behavior model, she's going up on that landscape. But then there's going to be demotivators. oh, what if I lose and then I'll look bad? That's demotivating. That. What if the time it takes me to run for office and make the poster is going to hurt my schoolwork? What if I'm just going to be afraid giving that speech? I have to give a speech, okay? So rather than pushing up on motivation to get your child or help your child make a good decision on this, if you can understand what's demotivating that behavior, then you can, it's like, great, we'll work on the speech, we'll practice the speech, boom, boom, boom. So in our own lives and other people's lives, sometimes it's not, and I want to say often, it's not as important to boost the motivation, but find what's demotivating the behavior and address it and get rid of that. I think that is a more important and practical way of thinking about motivation than intrinsic, extrinsic, because so often for ourselves and our spouses and our kids and our employees, what's stopping them from doing the behavior or creating a habit is the demotivators. And often that's fear. That's one of the big ones. But you can break that down. Fear of what? Oh, my schoolwork won't get done. I'll lose and look bad. I'll have to stand up there in front of everybody and I'll be shaking. And we need to address and tackle the demotivators to help ourselves and others move forward.
Beautiful. Okay, that's awesome. And Stephanie, do you have any examples of like a demotivator when it comes to like kiddos? Can you think of?
I think BJ gave some practical ones. I'm going to try and think of all ages ones.
Yeah.
So rejection. Their social peers will reject them if they bring tuna salad at lunch, or if they start eating, no meat, they get the vegetarian option in the cafeteria every day. Maybe it's the fear of, I think maybe we often go to like what our kids hope to do, but it's like what's suppressing their hope, and that's fear. What are they afraid of? Afraid of getting a bad grade, afraid of not performing optimally on the swim team this summer, so they decide not to join at all, afraid of screwing up the puzzle or the art project, so they just put off getting started because they have a fear of maybe not performing at the height that they are aiming for.
What about our littles though? Like our littles. Like if we think of like something you were talking about, yeah. If I'm thinking about motivation and we're trying to get our kids to clean up their room or I don't know, use the toilet or load the dishwasher, like we're trying to form a habit and we're trying to look at motivation. And so if we're looking at demotivators, then I'm not. What is the fear? Like what could be? Or maybe it's not fear. How would we look at it in that context for little ones?
Well, I will chime in, and then Stephanie, you can either correct me or add an example. In the tiny habits method, so I'm going back to the method, you make it so easy and small, you don't need much motivation to do it.
Okay.
So what you're doing is you're getting around so something like running for class president is going to take a lot of work. Therefore, it is going to require motivation. And if the motivation is not high enough, you can raise it by removing the demotivators. But that's a different project than creating a habit. It's a different type of behavior. One-time action versus a habit, which is repeated. Those are different behavior types. So both are behaviors. So the behavior model applies to both. So that's the hack in tiny habits, is to make it so easy to do. Like Stephanie said previously, just open the dishwasher. And then if Robert wants to then take out silverware and sort it, extra credit, awesome, right? But you circumvent, you do an end run around the motivation challenge by making it so easy to do.
Okay. Yeah, and I think kids are very naturally motivated to please their parents. And I mean, at 18 months, they're wanting to do chores. They want to help. I think parents sabotage themselves by not letting kids help when they're young. And they naturally have high levels of motivation to clean windows, to do the laundry, to do all the things that parents are like, but they're so messy when they do it. And I'm like, let them help. Like once you get kids like in the habit of helping, it's actually really easy to continue that habit because you started it when the brain is super neuroplastic and we're forming all out those neural pathways. And so sometimes it's just hard when we start them later in trying to cultivate the habits.
And can I build on that, from the tiny habits and behavior design perspective and my work and research at Stanford, the way I would interpret that, and I think it's right on, what you're doing is you are helping them create an identity young. I'm the kind of person who does household chores, and also a family or household identity. Here's how we operate. Okay. And once that identity gets wired in, then there is this ripple effect where it affects our other behaviors. We want to act that's consistent to our identity. Now, what we found in Tiny Habits is that when people feel successful doing a habit, yes, it helps wire in the habit, but also shifts their identity. So Robert opening up the dishwasher, maybe that's all he's doing right now, but then he's thinking, I'm the kind of person who helps in the kitchen. And then
I
the
love
family identity,
that.
right? So
That is such a good point. It is identity. It's like my kid defines who they are. I am part of this family. I'm someone who helps. I'm someone who is kind. And we use those narratives with our kids all the time. I just never thought of, I don't know why I didn't make that
yeah.
connection till like this second. I'm
Well,
like, oh yeah, we are forming who they are, like that identity piece.
yeah, and there's different ways to do identity. You can give somebody a role or a label, and et cetera, et cetera. You can, put up signs or something. But one way is when people feel successful doing a behavior, it shifts how they think about themselves within that domain. Okay. Notice it does not happen when they feel unsuccessful doing something. If they're like, you did a terrible job, sorting the silverware. I'm the kind of person that's bad at this, right? So you're forming the identity you don't want. So that's why this feeling of success, yes, wires and habits, but then has this identity shift, which then has a more global impact.
Beautiful. I want to talk to you guys about these songs. So you have these songs, and I think we get to hear some, and we get to talk about what they are and how you're utilizing them. Do you want to just touch on like what they are and how you're using them, and then we can listen to one, and then I can send people in when they look at the description of this episode. We can send them to the resource for the songs, like where we want.
Yeah, I'll say something briefly, and then Stephanie, you add in. So. With a team, I've been writing songs for kids about good habits. And these are not like trivial, songs that will drive you crazy when you listen to them over and over. By design, I think they're beautiful, uplifting songs that, as a parent, if you listen to them over and over and over, you will be uplifted. One song is about being kind. And Stephanie helped inspire this. Like she really wants her boys to value kindness. So we wrote a song, and it's a story song where this boy discovers what happens when he's kind. And that's sung by one of the best young male voices in the country. It's a beautiful song, and it's a great story. Another song is about easeify. So in the song, we teach the concept of make some things easier to do. And here's how you make something easier to do. One of the songs is about the motivation wave. I referred to that earlier, where it's like your motivation will go up and down, and that's normal and that's okay. So we want to kind of normalize and not make and have kids understand that my motivation is going to shift, and that's normal, and it's not a flaw in me. So that and that song has kind of a surfing Jack Johnson vibe to it. And there's other songs as well, but it is a collection that we're at right now. The song we're working on that's not yet out, but maybe very soon, is a song about twilight and that moment of your evening where you wind down. So we call it twilight. And we liken it to how nature calms down. And it's a beautiful song. And what we'd like to see, it's not out yet, but families playing this or singing it in the evening as a way to ramp down and relax and calm and put your worries aside and know that you're safe and so on. So each song has a purpose.
Can
Stephanie.
we hear one of the clips, Stephanie? Is that, or do you want to speak to that first? I'd like to hear a clip.
Yeah, let's play a clip.
Which song are we listening to?
BJ, do you have an idea,
Why don't you pick?
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go with the kindness song to start.
I would have voted there first.
Yeah, this is one of the best young male voices in the country. He's remarkable.
No, but you know what's going to happen, and we'll edit this part. I will insert the song here. So, Naveed, when you are editing, please insert said song here.
Just by being kind goes there.
Yeah, being kind goes here. So, how did you guys come up with this idea for these songs? Like, what?
Songs.
I'm just curious where this
Well,
came from, and how do parents access these songs?
well, I'll go to the access first, and
Yeah.
um, all the so and Stephanie helps me with this. We get all the songs onto all the streaming platforms. So any streaming platform, you'll find these songs. And it turns out, surprise to me, maybe not to you, if it's the songs for kids, you have to have a video. So
Gonna
we
tell
have a
ya.
YouTube channel, and the YouTube channel is Habit Songs for Kids. And that's so for the songs we've released, we also did videos. Oh, and by the way, y'all, the videos are way harder than the songs to do well. But we're really proud of them. And so you can see them there. But, any streaming, if you search Fogg Habit Songs for Kids, you'll tap into the collection. Stephanie, why don't you talk a little bit more about that, and then I'll come back and say, why this collection?
Sure. So at tinyhabits.com/songs, you can find all the links in one place. So if you're trying to get to the YouTube channel or any of the popular streaming services, you can get the details. And in addition to that, we have parents' guides for how you actually use the songs in your day-to-day life, or suggestions for how you use them, so that you can kind of bring the lesson or like the nugget into your household to help your family be more harmonious. And to help your children and you see ways to play or use the songs in your day to day. So you can find all that at tinyhabits.com/songs.
I'm having
And
grief right now. I didn't know about this, or it's my son's 7 now. He will appreciate this, but I really, really wish I found this when he was like in my middle or tiny. Like that would just, when they're just like so excited about everything when they're your children's age, like 2, they just love
Yeah.
songs and they love dancing, and this just would be such a wonderful thing to listen to in the car. But I am going to definitely have a listen. My son loves music, so I imagine this will be great for him too.
Well, and that goes to the reason why I thought, well, I want to do some songs here. So Tiny Habits book, spent many years doing the research and a few years writing it, and it's available and adults can read it and they can listen to it on audio, me narrating for better or for worse. But it's like, kids aren't going to read my book. And so how can I help kids? And in my life, I grew up in a home, in a culture, a tradition where music was a big thing, and music was used to uplift and also influence our behaviors, frankly. And for me, I would love to help kids around the world do better with habits, do better with their confidence, do better with kindness, and so on. And so songs, and I grew up with some musical training, so it felt like a natural. Once I found the other very talented people who work with me on writing and putting together songs, production value is very high. And then there are things like, I'll read you a little bit from the Twilight lyrics. This is not yet
Yeah.
released. We may revise it. So imagine, Twilight is the moment where the sun goes below the horizon. And there's actually 3 phases of Twilight. I won't get into that. But in this song, it goes, twilight is nature's wind down time. Quietly, the sunlight fades away. The gentle glow, moving slow, guiding me to calm and close my day. When it's my twilight and the day is done, and then we go into things like, I move slow, I breathe in and out, and there's actually
It's very
a little
rhythmic.
breath work in the song. So that one
Yeah.
is not about anything conceptual about habits or motivation. It is a moment or a period of a family's life that we think it's really important to have the habit or the routine or the tradition of having this twilight, and rather than ramping up, ramping down.
Well, but you are creating a habit that, bet parents, I know Stephanie will speak to this with littles right now. There is a rhythm to bedtime. And any parent who has struggled with forming habits at night know that that routine is pivotal to success as a parent with sleep time. So we wind down, we start to dim the lights, we have a bath, we sing a
Yeah.
song, we do a book. Like there is this quiet, and if you don't have the rhythm, kids get wired. Like they need that predictability and consistency, but there's also this gentleness to it. And I'm hearing, like, as you're saying the words, how rhythmic that is. And the rhythm is a huge part of calming the brainstem. So I'm
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, like this from a look at neurobiology, that makes a lot of sense why you would introduce something like this.
Yeah, I was going to suggest too that in the context that we're talking a lot about how to help our kids, but I just want to just shine the light a little bit on the parents who are doing the design for their children every day. I hear this from so many parents that like it is a lot. And so to create breathing space, to create experiences in your family's day that also let you relax a little,
Mm-hmm.
that let you tend to yourself in even tiny ways as you're tending to your children in such substantial ways. Don't forget the power of using all the methods and success messages and celebrations for yourself. There are so many moments of my day where and I'm a pretty upbeat person, you know, like I identify with that. But I'll stand in front of the mirror as I'm like clean up the bathroom a little to go get my kids in their pajamas, and I'll just look in the mirror and I'll say, "You're doing a really good job. You're doing a really good job."
So good.
Those mantras can be very helpful.
It's very calm, but it's like this mini celebration I need that propels me into the bedtime routine. Because I don't want to wake up 10 years from now with kids who say, "Good night, mom," and close the door and think, "Oh my gosh, I rushed through that because it was stressful, because it was a big lift, because I had already had a long day or whatever." So recognize that, like, yes, we want these songs to uplift kids and teach kids new ways to form habits, but we also want to affirm the families and the parents and the caregivers who are doing this every day. It's so
Wow.
important that we apply these same principles to ourselves in our parenting role or our caregiving role, because that looks a lot different for a lot of different people.
Well, I think this podcast was really important because we often spend 90% of this is focused on children. And it's so important that we think about the parent's own mental health. And a huge part of this is feeling successful as a parent and as just a human being, not just like their identity separate from their kids. That's important to have. Yeah. And I like that we were able to have you both on because I with BJ, I've seen your TED Talks and we've purchased your book at the Institute, and we're really going to we want parents to have success because they're going to be better parents when they feel successful, when they're healthy. So I think this is a good podcast just to say, like, maybe motivate some of our parents being like, I need to take care of myself. I'm going to invest in myself. I'm going to buy this book. I want to make changes in my life. So, I live longer, I'm happier, and I can show up for my kids. So I really appreciate that we took the time to do that today and to say, parents, it's manageable. You just need this formula that's not nearly as hard as we think it is. We just had to dissect it a little bit.
Yeah. Well, it is so great. And thank you for inviting me and inviting Stephanie to join you to share tiny habits, the method, share insights on how behavior really works. There's so much out there that's actually wrong and incorrect. I mean, don't trust all the old traditions and assumptions about habits and behaviors. So much of it is wrong-headed. And that's why one reason why people have really struggled, really motivated, well-intentioned people have been trusting in the old wisdom that's really not wisdom at all. It's misguided. And that's been a big part of my project. After the behavior model snapped together for me, it's like, oh my gosh, here it is. It's not that complicated. And then a habit formation method called tiny habits that emerged from that. It's like, oh my gosh, it's really not that hard to form habits quickly and easily if you use this method. And then how do we extend that out and have bigger impact, leading to the songs for kids? And we'll keep creating these. I just don't really see why we would stop. There is one of the topics that I'm working on right now in the lyrics is to help kids be okay with change. Like change is natural. It can be big and small. It can be designed. It can be accidental.
Ooh,
But change will happen, and it opens doors. It's an opportunity because I
that's
think,
a big one. I'm telling you right now. Like
right?
you're gonna, yeah, that might be your biggest one in
Yeah,
terms
like
of like mental health and
helping
what
them.
kids struggle with. Yeah.
Yeah, helping them feel good about change and the lyrics. So I work on the front end conceptually, like here's an important concept. And then I work with songwriters and musicians who really make it work. But one of the ideas was like in my own life, I hated tomatoes as a kid. I love tomatoes now. There's certain colors I hated. I love it now. And I think those will be some of the examples in the songs like, hey, things change and that's okay and that's good. And, you know, and even if you don't like the change right now, just see how it will open doors and so on. So we'll work it out. But I think that kind of those kinds of and this is why there's songs for kids, but yeah, also for grown-ups like us too.
Hopefully the parents are going to take home some messages from those songs if they hear them enough times. Well, thank you both so much. I will include the links that you sent me, the tinyhabits.com. Obviously, they can go there to look at your resources and buy your book. I'm sure you can find, I could find it anywhere. I looked on Amazon and I'm sure you can get it chapters and Indigo. But tinyhabits.com/songs was the one.
Yes.
I'll include the link to your book as well as the site. And I think we're actually going to put this URL in our app as a resource because I think this would be really good for motivation and teaching healthy habits to kids. So thank you. This will definitely be something we recommend to people. So thank you both so much for making the time. I'm glad it was an honor to have you. And thank you so much for all the work you're doing in the parenting and personal development world.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tammy.
Have a good day, guys. Bye.
Okay, well, that was fun. And Stephanie, you did a great job. Of course, you did a great job. So, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was. No, it's